You know that feeling when you're playing a video game and you walk to the edge of the map and then suddenly there's just nothing, an empty void. I mean, the game literally hasn't bothered to create anything beyond that point because, well, why would it? You're not supposed to be there. Now imagine you're hiking in the mountains and you come across the edge of reality. That's kind of a wild thought, right? But here's one thing. Some of the smartest people on Earth are seriously asking this question. What if that's exactly what happens? What if our entire universe is just the rendered zone of some cosmic video game? And here's where it gets unusually really weird. What if that game is running inside another game?
You have reached the signal. This is the ARQIV, a safe space for the curious, science and technology-minded.
So welcome to another edition of the ARQIV, and today we're going to be diving in to one of the deepest rabbit holes in modern science and philosophy. We're going to be talking about recursive simulations. It's kind of like realities stacked on top of realities, like some kind of metaphysical house of cards. And by the end of this episode, you're going to look at quantum mechanics, AI, and even your daily routine in a very completely different way. So buckle up. We're about to ask questions about everything, everywhere, all at once. All right, so let's start out with the idea that broke everyone's brain back in 2003. Philosopher Nick Bostrom drops this paper called "Are You Living in a Computer Simulation?" And honestly, it wasn't your typical philosophy type of paper filled with abstract concepts about the nature of being. This was math. This was cold, hard logic. And here's Bostrom's argument. And honestly, it's beautifully simple, okay? 1, if any civilization gets advanced enough to run realistic simulations of their own history, and 2, if they actually decide to do it, and then 3, they probably wouldn't just stop at 1. They would run thousands, maybe millions of simulations, which means, mathematically speaking, there are way more simulated beings than real ones. So what are the odds you're one of the real ones? Neil deGrasse Tyson put that at 50-50. And Elon Musk? Well, outside of all the other things he thinks about, he thinks the chances we're in base reality are 1 billion to 1. Now, when I first heard this, my reaction was basically, so, that's a really cool story, but I mean, what's it gonna do for me? Like, even if we are living in a simulation, what does that change? I mean, I still have to pay my mortgage, I still get hungry, my coffee still tastes like coffee. I really gotta do something about that. But then I started to think about it just a little bit differently. See, most people stop at the first question. Are we in a simulation? But there's a much more interesting question hiding underneath that one. How deep does this go? Because here's the thing about advanced civilizations running simulations of their past. They're honestly probably not the first to think of it. What if the simulation running our simulation is also simulated? What if it's simulations all the way down? And that's when you realize we're not just talking about computer science anymore, we're actually talking about the fundamental structure of reality itself. The question isn't just, are we real? It's, what does real even mean when everything might be recursive? Okay, so let's say we are in a simulation. How do you actually pull that off? I mean, think about it. If you wanted to simulate an entire universe, particle by particle, atom by atom, you'd need a computer the size of, well, the universe. That right there is a problem, but game developers solved this decades ago. You know how? It's through optimization. When you're playing Grand Theft Auto, the game isn't rendering the entire city all at once. It's only creating the stuff you can see. If you turn around, the world behind you gets loaded. If you walk away, it gets archived. It's called the level of detail rendering, or occlusion calling. Occlusion calling? Anyway, Super efficient. Now, and this is where it gets spicy, what if the universe works the same way? And then enters quantum mechanics. I know. Everyone's eyes glaze over when you mention quantum physics. But stay with me because this is actually the fun part. Because here's the weird thing about quantum particles. They don't seem to choose what they are until you actually look at them. This weird phenomenon, some of you may know, is called the observer effect, and it's been driving physicists and myself absolutely bonkers for over a century. Not that I'm that old. But an electron can be spinning clockwise and counterclockwise at the exact same time until you actually measure it. Then it collapses into one state. Does that sound familiar? Because it's like the universe is saying, why bother calculating the exact position of this electron if nobody's looking at it? You know what? I'll just keep it in a probability cloud until someone checks. Step in physicist Melvin Vopson, who took this idea and ran with it. He argues that if information itself might have mass, that the universe could literally be managing data like a computer, compressing unused information, garbage collecting old data, if you will. I mean, think about it, the speed of light. We call it a fundamental constant, but what if it's actually just a frame rate? The maximum speed at which information can propagate through the system before things get unstable. And here's something that'll blow your mind even wider. Ever wondered why we haven't found aliens yet? That's the Fermi Paradox. With billions of stars and planets, where is everybody? But from the perspective of the simulation, I mean, it makes perfect sense because why render billions of advanced civilizations if there's only one player that's actually exploring? That is a massive waste of processing power. Think of things like Minecraft. The world generates as you explore it. Walk in one direction long enough and you'll actually find empty chunks that haven't been created yet. Maybe the universe works the same way. Maybe we haven't found aliens because we haven't walked far enough yet. But here's the recursive part and where it gets really interesting. What if our simulation is running on limited resources because it's inside another simulation that's also trying to optimize? So each layer down, the available processing power gets smaller. The shortcuts get more obvious, which might explain why quantum mechanics is so weird in the first place. Maybe what we're seeing isn't fundamental physics. Maybe it's the artifacts of a system running at max capacity, trying to simulate more than it can basically handle. Okay, now let's zoom out from particles and talk about something you can actually observe. People. Because if we're in a simulation, the optimization tricks aren't just happening at the quantum level. They're happening at the social level too. Ever played The Sims? The NPCs or non-playable characters in that game are incredibly simple. They have maybe 5 or 6 basic routines. They go to work, eat, sleep, socialize, and repeat. It feels like a bustling, complex world. Now, I want you to think about your own daily life. How many people do you interact with? Do any of them seem to be running on autopilot? Let's take the barista where you get your coffee. Do they say the same exact greeting every morning? The coworker who tells the same 3 stories? Your neighbor who follows the identical routine every single day? Now, I'm not saying these people aren't real, because I don't even know if I'm real. I may be a non-playable character. But what I am saying is that predictable behavior is computationally cheap. Let's look at the bigger picture. In most of the world, if your parents are farmers, you'll probably be a farmer. If they're doctors, you will probably be one too. Entire class systems persist across generations. Social mobility exists, but it's the exception, not the actual rule. From a simulation standpoint, this makes perfect sense. I mean, why calculate unique, unpredictable life paths for 7 billion people when you can run most of them on the same template? Think about how social media algorithms actually work, because they don't create unique content for every single user. They identify patterns and serve similar content to similar people. Maybe reality works the same way. maybe most people are running on what computer scientists would call default behavior. They're following the most probable path through life, making predictable choices and living predictable stories. But here's the thing. Every simulation has anomalies, players who break the script, people who do unexpected things, who ask weird questions. Know anybody like that? These are people who refuse to follow the optimization patterns. And maybe that's what consciousness really is, the ability to be unpredictable, to be computationally expensive. Maybe it's to be glitchy. If we're in a nested simulation, a simulation inside a simulation, then maybe the people who feel the most awake, most questioning, most willing to explore the edge of reality, maybe we're the ones creating processing spikes. Maybe we're the ones that are creating bugs in the system that actually prove the system actually exists. Now, I'm not saying everyone else is an NPC, but I am saying that in a resource-limited environment, which any nested simulation world would be in, you would expect to see exactly what we do see. Lots of predictable behavior, with occasional bursts of genuine creativity and consciousness. Now, here's where this story takes a really interesting turn, because we're building our own simulations right now. Think of ChatGPT, Claude, and advanced AI systems. They're creating text that feels human, art that moves people, conversations that seem real. And we're just getting started. Within the next decade, we'll probably have AI that can simulate entire virtual worlds, complete with non-playable characters that pass the Turing test, if they haven't already, and we just don't know about it. Digital beings that might actually be conscious. So here's the question. If we're in a simulation and we're building simulations, what does that make us? Are we the simulated beings creating the next layer down? Is this how it always worked? Each level of reality eventually becomes advanced enough to create the next level of reality? Think about it this way. Maybe the beings running our simulation aren't gods or aliens, or even future humans. Maybe they're us. Some version of us that achieve consciousness inside a simulation, advanced enough to run simulations of their own past. And maybe the beings running their simulation are doing the exact same thing. It's not turtles all the way down, it's consciousness all the way down. Each layer dreaming the next layer into existence. Which means that the AI we're creating right now, they might be asking the same questions about us that we're asking about our creator. They might be looking at their reality, our computers, our code, our digital infrastructure, and wondering if they're in a simulation. That's crazy. And honestly, they'd be right. But then again, so are we. Maybe consciousness isn't something that emerges from complexity. Maybe consciousness is what creates complexity. Maybe every conscious being at some point becomes curious enough about their own existence that they try to recreate it, to understand themselves by simulating themselves. And maybe that's what reality is, just an infinite chain of conscious beings, each one creating the conditions for the next level of consciousness to emerge. All right, so let's take a step back. Are we in a simulation of a simulation? Honestly, we may never know for sure. But here's what I find beautiful about the whole idea. Bear with me. It doesn't actually matter. Whether this is the base reality or layer 47 or universe 828 in the Marvel universe, your emotions are still real to you. Your relationships still matter. Your choices still have consequences. The love you feel, the problems you solve, the art you create, it all has the same weight whether it's made of atoms or bits. But thinking about recursion does change one thing: how we see the patterns. If you start looking at your life like it might be optimized or scripted or templated, you start noticing where you have actual agency and where you're just running on defaults. You start asking, am I making this choice, or is this choice making me? And that question, that awareness, might be the whole point. Maybe the goal of any simulation isn't to fool its inhabitants. Maybe the goal is to create conditions where consciousness can wake up to itself, where beings can become aware enough to ask the big question, to break their own loops, to create something genuinely new. So here's my challenge to you. Look for your pattern. Find your defaults. Notice where your life feels scripted, and then break the script. Not because you're trying to escape a simulation, but because consciousness, or real consciousness, is what happens when you stop running on autopilot. When you become the anomaly in your own predictable story. So there you have it. Recursive reality. Simulations all the way down. Consciousness creating consciousness creating consciousness. Is it true? I don't know, maybe. Is it terrifying? Just a little bit. But is it also kind of amazing? Absolutely. Because if we are here in a simulation, it means consciousness is so persistent, so creative, so determined to understand itself that it will literally dream new realities into existence. That's not a bug. That's the most beautiful feature I can imagine. If this episode broke your brain in the best possible way, share it with someone who loves big questions. Leave a review. Subscribe for more reality-bending content. And remember, whether you're made of atoms or algorithms, you're still the most complex, unpredictable, amazing thing in your particular universe. So keep questioning, keep exploring, keep breaking your loops. I'll see you on the next layer of reality.